welcome to Sylvan Designs. Today we are going to be talking about everything tools. Have you ever watched a video where somebody is just dotting along, picking up what feels like random tools and being able to make the most beautiful mandalas without even thinking about it? I thought a lot in the beginning, how in the world are they doing that? Is there some sort of secret? Because when I start putting dots around a circle, I get these funny little gaps and my dots don't fit exactly right. Or the picture that I'm trying to copy doesn't look exactly like what they're doing. So I started playing around, and the more I started to play around, a couple of things started to dawn on me, and I'm going to share that with you. I have in front of me here a couple of pieces of paper which I want to go over with you. All of the things that you're going to see here, all of my little designs, are all of the centers are a 12 millimeter. So all of these centers are going to be 12s. Okay. In this particular section, I marked clockwise direction because when we start dotting, we're going to put a dot right at the top and we're going to work our way clockwise around the dot. One or two of the videos that I had watched as a beginner indicated, just like this, to start at the top, start putting in your dots, and just keep slowly working around. The particular dots on this page are 0.5 millimeters. So these are going to be the real tiny point. Okay. Now, a couple of these people that I watched essentially have suggested that, okay, go right on around and then you just kind of make it fit, right? You start increasing your spacing near the end to avoid any gap. So as you can see here, everything starts out nice and tight and works around. But then as we get about here to this midpoint, the dots start separating. Now, if you look at this quickly, just take a quick glance at it, you don't really notice. And that's perfectly fine. And you can do that. But there's got to be a better way, right? Instead of having this little spacing here or kind of wherever it ends up. If you start doing this, starting from the top and working around, and if you either don't have practice or if you don't really understand how the tool sizes work, or maybe you just don't have a real good variety, so to speak, of tool sizes, you're going to run into this stuff. So you're going to go clockwise, and then right here at the end, you're going to end up with this weird gap. You're either going to have to squish something in, because I've got this in these two places here. So you're either going to have to squish a dot in, or do something like we did up here and kind of space this out a little bit more. And I marked the tools that I use just kind of as a reference point, and they don't really make much difference. This one is a 3 and this one is a 2.5. And both of these around a 12 millimeter initial dot did give the gap. Now I did over here, I did do one with a 1.5. And the 1.5, as you can see, I mean, my dots aren't exactly even, but it did come to the top. I did not have anything overlapped and I did not have a gap. Yay, check mark. Same thing with the 6. I ended up doing it with a 6. And those came out pretty well as well. Now this is not meant as any kind of guideline, okay? You might be able to do a 3 and a 2.5 and you could certainly get away with it. But I'm just kind of showing you what can happen if you start at the top and you go around, depending on what size your center dot is and what size the dots you want to use going around. Now, honestly, is there a mathematical equation for this? Yes, there is. Is anybody that I know in their right mind going to be using it when it comes to trying to figure out what tool to use to get around perfectly? No, nobody's going to do that. We kind of have to use our own judgment. The next thing I want to talk about are kind of over here in these sections. When you start dotting, you're going to notice some of these really beautiful patterns. And as the patterns like this grow outward, you start to see this beautiful eye in the center. That eye is created by something that I refer to as nesting, and I don't know actually if that's the right term or not, but that's kind of how I refer to it. And essentially what that is once you've done your first row of dots, in the little crook between the two dots is where you want to put your next dot. So this one falls right in between here, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. One of the things that I wanted to mention here is with this nesting, things can kind of go astray. In this particular example, I've used 1 full millimeter jump for each outer ring. Okay, so we start with, this is a 12 millimeter circle. We have a 2 for the first, a 3, and then a 4. As you can see here, I did my best to try to kind of keep these nested in, and we started getting some gaps in some places. However, if I move down here, I did go ahead and do an incremental jump, so 2, 4, and then 6, and getting these nested. This looks a little bit better, right? So you do have these outside ones kind of touching, they're a lot closer together, and everything relatively looks nice. The only problem is in some situations you might get off, as you can see here, with your nesting. Okay, you're not going to be able to get every single one of these in place properly. As you look, you'll see many of these that are right on top of another dot. They're not nested. Okay, it looks nice around the edges, and it's not going to put off your design at all. But you do want to think about something like this if you really want this nesting, and you could even go a little bigger here. And you want to start thinking about that, how you want this when you get your design. So you could potentially increase this, for example, for from a 4 to a 5 to a 6, however you want to do it. But again, start thinking about, okay, do I really want these to be nested and have that kind of cat's eye sort of design in the center there where everything is nested beautifully? Or do we just want things to touch? How exactly do you want that? Okay, so that'll help you make the choice of your dotting tools. One of the things that I run into a lot, especially when it comes to beginners, is when you are trying to mimic a design or when you're doing designs yourself, you end up with something that looks like this rather than either of these. And it's pretty noticeable immediately. One of the reasons for this is because of the sizing differences. Now, like with these, I went up 2, 3, and 4. And with these, I went 2, 4, 6. Well, in a lot of the basic sets, now by basic sets, I mean 90% of the stuff that you find in these kits, the mandala kits, are going to be these. So you're gonna have your dot art tools, you're gonna have a couple of acrylic rods in various sizes, and then you're gonna get these ball tools. Now, using these tools, they're really great, and I have nothing against the tools. But like my tool set here, personally, the sizes are kind of funky. Everything, so let me flip this one over so it's correct when I say this. All of the tips on this side are 1.5 or are quoted to be a 1.5. On this side, I have a 3. I have a 2.5. 2.6. I have a 3, a 2.6, a 2.1. Okay. And then it goes down to a 1 and a 0.5. Not a whole lot of range. Okay. So, and then the difference between a 3, a 2.5, and a 2.1, it's sort of odd. What I did here is use those tools to do this. And as you can see, going through, yes, absolutely. The 1.5 that I have here to start with, the light pink, fits perfect. The 2.1 I've surrounded it with, it's nice. It looks beautiful, okay? But there is no nesting. Almost each and every one of these are just going to be off. Then we go up to the 2.6 here in the kind of beige color. And again, same thing. You're not going to get good nesting, and the sizes are so close together, you might as well be using one or the other, right? I mean, it's not even an even 0.5 increase. A little funky. And then again, moving up to the 3, I did try to get some nesting in here, but you end up either with something that looks like this that won't be nested, or if it is nested, you're going to have a lot of these gaps because you don't have these nice, beautiful, equal increases in size to get you through. The other thing I want to talk about, and the other thing that's helped a lot, is using the compass, right? And what I mean by that is when you put your first dot down, the purple is my first dot, north, south, east, and then west, all right? Then you do the second set in between the first two. So you would go northwest, southwest, northeast. You get the picture, okay? But then in this particular example, I did a 3 millimeter for all of them. And what ends up happening is right here in between, you can't exactly fit the third round. What do you do then, right? Why in the world am I gonna suggest using the compass if it's not gonna fit? Well, here's why. You get an opportunity to fix it. You get an opportunity to do some cool stuff in here. Even if you're working with tools like these, where you don't have a full set of 16 or 20 or 30 different sizes. I did the exact same thing here as here. I started out with the purple, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I went to the beige, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in between, instead of trying to squeeze something in, I went down to a 1.5 dot and I used that here as a little filler. You could do whatever you want. You could put, like I did here, I jumped up to these dots, which were a 6, because I sort of wanted them to fill the gap between the beige and the purple, right? What you could do here is like I have here, I have 2 dots. You could make them equal. I did 2 walked dots. You could make it 3. You could do a little crown in here, or you could leave it, because now these pink dots would be a fantastic base to do walked dots on, because now you have all this beautiful extra space in here. And this type of thing, having this little kind of quote unquote filler dot in here, is what a lot of people do when they start the walked dot series, because again, it's going to give you this nice platform for this dot to sit on and ensures there's going to be a gap. To that extent, I was talking about the set that you first start with. Okay, these ones, I grabbed just a couple of the small acrylic rods. I have a ton more, but you know, these are some of the basic ones. And then I grabbed one of these to the clay balls. And one thing I'm gonna warn about is the fact that not all tools are created equal and not all of them are the same size, even if they say they are. I did this example here. This particular little design was made with my HDC, which is the Happy Dotting Company's tools, which are these ones here, okay? So I used, in this particular scenario, I used a 3, a 6, and an 8. So these are the 3 that I used to create this. I did this exact same thing here, down here, using a 3, a 6, and an 8, okay? But I'm gonna lay these tools down. There is a big difference. As you see here, this green tool and this large dot, this is considered a 3 in the nail art tool, the ones that I own. A 3 in the nail art and the 3 in the Happy Dotting Company tools are most obviously not the same, even though they're both quoted to be a 3 millimeter. And I'll explain why that is here in just a second. Okay, but you can start to see the difference here already. Much, much bigger. The next one that I used was the actual rod, the acrylic rod. Now, because these have the flat ends, the Happy Dotting Companies, as well as the acrylic rods here, they're almost identical, right? So not a big deal. Those are really pretty similar. I just added one here. This one was a slight touch bigger. Okay, but not by much at all. And then lastly was the 8, right? So the 8 here was a pretty significant difference from this one. And this is the clay ball tools. You do not end up with the same looking design, even if you decide to use the same size tools. If you're working along, say, with someone's YouTube tutorial and your stuff isn't coming out right, if you don't have the exact same tools that they're using, this is a very big possibility. You could absolutely have this happen. And so don't freak out, okay? You do need to make sure though that you adjust, right? So if you see that that person is using something like this, then they're gonna have just this amount of space and you end up with more, you wanna compensate, okay? And it's not gonna be easy for a beginner, but like I said, don't freak out. What you would wanna do in this situation is kind of do something like this. Make sure that you come back and you might end up with some fillers. Okay, it's not that big of a deal, and at some point I'm going to make another video about some of the more beautiful, maybe a little bit more intricate ways that you can fix some of these mistakes instead of just this kind of elementary thing that I did here for you for an example. I'm going to stop there for a quick second and show you what I was talking about. Now, when it comes to measuring, keep in mind, I'm going to use this one as an example. Keep in mind that these tools are made for clay. These are meant to press into clay, right? When these are measured, these tools are measured at its middle point, okay? So if you were to slice this ball in half across here and make it flat, that is where the measurement across is gonna come from, okay? It's gonna come from here to here, okay? But when we dip the tool, we're only going to get paint, maybe not even up to here, maybe just the tip. So that's why it's going to give us this tiny little one versus this, which is going to give us the larger dot, because again, this is flat. We're measuring directly across, okay? We're not measuring around this one, because this is not flat. The surface area that's actually going to touch and use paint is way up here. It's not here. This is accurate, okay? This is an 8mm, and this 8mm is gonna be from side to side. Keep that in mind. One of the other things that I kind of played around with too was the spacing and how designs kind of lay themselves out when we end up with the wrong tool sizes. One of the things that I kind of stumbled upon, kind of accidentally as a beginner, kind of show as well, because it sort of falls under the tool header, is if you look at these two here compared to these two here. Now, this here is more rounded. These two are sort of round, and these ones kind of have a tip. Okay? The other thing to notice is that the dots that run along here, there's going to be more of them versus these ones here. However, if you notice my little drawing, these are made with a 1.5 and these are made with a 1.5. The only difference is the fact that on top here, I've used a 3mm dot, and here I have not. I've just used the same 1.5 to make the dots here, another one here, and then dot these, right? So dot, go down, dot, go down. So I'm essentially double dotting this one, but not using a different tool, not actually truly increasing the size. This one, I'm using another tool completely, right? And so I have a shorter stem here, shorter set of blocked dots. They are going to be a little bit fatter because of that, right? Because your paint isn't falling off as quickly. So these dots are going to be fatter. They're going to fill up quicker than these ones do. If you were to continue with this particular pattern, as I have down here, this is sort of what ends up happening. So essentially I've taken this and I've drawn it down here, right? So we started exactly the same. And as you can see, if you go up one, I've used a 2 here. These really get accentuated and round if you don't put an extra large dot on top. They get really rounded. These ones, you can get them to a nice tip, a nice point if you want them to. This wasn't the best example of this. I should have spread them out a little bit more, but I at least wanted to show how the round and the kind of triangular kind of pointed petal tips are created versus the rounded ones, because in the beginning, I started out doing this and I got really, really frustrated when I couldn't make the nice sharp tipped petals, and I didn't know why. And this was why, because I was using just one size to cover the whole thing. Now you can do it this way, and you can find a way to make it beautiful, because you can actually, give this one a nice heavy dip and truly make this one a little bit bigger with that same tool. If you're experiencing this is why, right? So you're gonna have more of a pointed tip here when I did the 4 and then the 3 as a dot, and that's just sort of an experience there. But again, this one shows a little bit better how much larger the dots on the side are. Depending on what the person is doing that you're trying to follow, if you end up overlapping or not having enough room, between the two sections, or if on the other hand you end up with a lot more space, now you're going to know why. Okay, because your dots are probably going to be fatter. You may not have as many dots coming down off of the initial point, or maybe you just don't have the top point. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. I absolutely hope that some of this was helpful to someone. If you have any other questions or comments to add to this, please drop those below. I would love to see what you guys have got to say about it. If you've made it this far, make sure you give me a quick like and subscribe if you did enjoy the content. And if you want to see some more stuff like this, let me know. I'll be happy to make it for you. You take care. You have a great day. Enjoy.